A war thousands of kilometers away, but one that has hit Nigerians where it hurts the most, their pockets. And in a matter of weeks, petrol prices surged, transport fares jumped, and the cost of everyday essentials, from bread to pure water, began to climb. Across markets, traders say everything has gone up. But here is the questions, and what does that distant conflict that travels so far into the lives of ordinary Nigerians? Is this simply the reality of a globalized world, or is it a sign that Nigeria is dangerously exposed? After the break, Cheta Nwanze, partner SBM Intelligence, joins us to go beyond the headlines to unpack the chain reactions from global oil prices to your daily commute to the food on your table. So much discussion ahead. Stay with us.
You're welcome back to Jasiri, where it's time for us to unpack a crisis that may have started far away, but is now being felt in homes, markets, streets across Nigeria. So in late February, a major conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran erupted in the Middle East. And within days, global oil prices spiked. Within weeks, the impact had traveled thousands of kilometers, landing squarely on the Nigerian economy. So here at home, petrol prices surged dramatically, transport fares climbed, and the cost of basic goods, from food to everyday essentials, began to rise. According to a recent report from SBM Intelligence, more than 80% of traders across Nigeria say the prices of goods they buy and sell have increased, and they directly link those increases to this conflict. Now think about that for a moment. A trader in Lagos, a driver in Kano, a market woman in Onitsha, people who are not part of this conflict in any way are now adjusting their lives, their businesses, and their expectations because of it.
And that brings us to the deeper, more uncomfortable questions. How does a country that produces crude oil end up this vulnerable to global price shocks? Why does a disruption thousands of kilometers away immediately translate into hardship at Nigerian markets? And perhaps most importantly, what does this say about the structure of our economy and the decisions we've made over time? Because this is not just about one war. It's about a pattern where global events, whether it's conflicts, pandemics, or supply chain disruptions, repeatedly expose the same weaknesses in Nigeria's system: weak buffers, heavy import dependence, and limited protection for the people who feel the impact the most. It's not just about asking what happened, but asking why does it keep happening, and what will it take to break the code? Now, with us is Cheta Nwanze. He's partner at SBM Intelligence. They are responsible for the Traders on Iran reports. Cheta, welcome to Jasiri. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Cheta.
Cheta is always a delight.
Ladies, we know that this conversation is going to go everywhere, so let's go. Because when Cheta comes,
we're excited.
So let's get to it.
Thank you very much. It's always so interesting when you sit with us at this table.
Yeah.
We know you've studied this very closely. So please walk us through these chain reactions, because I know a lot of Nigerians want to know. At what exact point did, a geopolitical conflict become a Nigerian economic crisis? Where are the weakest links in that chain? Because a layman wants to understand in the barest, easiest way you can just...
Why they're dropping bombs?
Why are they dropping bombs
in
here?
Iran?
And we are feeling the impact here. And we're oil exporters.
Do we want to start at the beginning?
No, that might be like the beginning of time.
No.
Let's start at the beginning. Yes.
I think the key thing for people to understand is that since 1943, when the U.S. president at the time, Franklin Roosevelt, paid a visit to the Saudi King Abdullah, oil has been priced in U.S. dollars. Mm-hmm. So that's why we have the petrodollar. So basically, the global oil economy is in dollars. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter whether Dangote refinery is refining here in Nigeria. He pays in dollars to buy the crude, the feedstock. So when that feedstock goes up, when the price of that goes up, everything. And at the end of the day, despite all of the attempts to move towards renewables, which ironically, the people who have succeeded the most in moving towards renewables is China. So the rest of the world is still very dependent on oil, and gas. And the Strait of Hormuz, which is, if you look at a map, the Strait of Hormuz is stuck between Iran and Oman. More of it in Iranian territorial waters. 20% of global crude oil and 30% of global gas passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Basically, you find that Qatar, the Emirates, almost all of Saudi's oil production, because the majority of Saudi Arabia's oil fields are in the east of Saudi Arabia, so it all has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So imagine yams. You buy yam every day in the markets, and then suddenly 20% of that yam is taken offline. What is remaining? I mean, basic economic 101, scarcity creates an increase in prices.
Yeah.
So the moment you block off 20% of global oil and 30% of global gas, then there will be a shortage. And one thing that has happened, gas especially, is very difficult to store.
Yes.
So because of that, that shortage immediately. So I want to correct, Catherine, you said that it took a couple of days before we began to feel the impact. No, it wasn't.
It was immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah. The thing is, one thing that the Americans have perfected, especially under Trump is very sensitive to the markets. Most of his escalatory actions happen at the weekend when the markets are closed. So the attack on Iran happened
Overnight Friday. I remember I was woken up.
I woke up in the morning, and as soon as I have these bad habits. My wife has been trying to break it. She has failed woefully.
I can imagine that.
Whenever I wake up, the first thing I do is reach for my phone and then go to my news feed. Sorry, I'm a news junkie. So I picked up my phone, and the first thing I saw was U.S.-Israel attacked Iran. And as soon as I saw it, I dropped my phone and told my wife, "Oh yeah, wake up, get your car." I get my car, go and fill up, because this is going to happen. And that's what's happened. Fuel prices went through the roof. Now, Nigeria happens to have the highest proportion of price increase, 14%. But that's potatoes. For your average Western country, it was in the order of 13%. And the reason that we had this is because for the first time in our history, we are exposed to the oil markets in its real form. You know, we used to have this thing called the fuel subsidy, which, to be honest, is not, I think that, so we've been studying 3 countries, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and Ghana, and what has happened since then. In Ivory Coast, the prices have not changed because they still have a fuel subsidy, but the government has been burning cash to keep prices the same. Ghana has a halfway house, sort of. So I keep forgetting the name of what they have a mechanism where it's every 2 weeks that they adjust prices. So the government pays a sort of subsidy, but it is only for 2 weeks at a time. So they've increased prices twice since this war started, because at the end of each period, then they revise the prices, and they've revised it upwards. So it has not been such a shock to the system. Ghanaians had time to prepare.
All right, Cheta, let's stick to what affects us, and that's in Nigeria, because we know that these oil prices.
Nigerian.
No, I'm not spending in cedis. I'm not spending in rand. I'm spending in naira. Let me look at my naira.
So these oil prices, spiked globally, but not every country experienced the level of shock. You talked about how it spiked quickly for Nigerians, and I just want to paint a brief picture, because I don't think a lot of people are able to grasp how much it has affected us in Nigeria, because we're used to suffering and smiling and then managing. So this morning I woke up very early, 4 a.m., and I decided to go for a run around 5:30. I usually do that, but I decided to go for...
You?
Hold on now. You woke up early as well.
I woke up early, but I can't run.
All right. 5:30 a.m. I stepped out, and there were already people outside, dressed up and walking to work. Unlike back then, when, the roads would have been empty. That is how bad it is. So they can get to their places of work in time to resume. Now, what is uniquely Nigerian about how quickly and severely this translated into higher petrol prices?
So It's not, again, it's not uniquely Nigerian. So I'll give the example of the UK, which I'm extremely familiar with. On the day the crisis started, fuel prices were an average of £1.28 per litre. As of yesterday, it was an average of £1.55. That's significant if you convert it into Naira. It's roughly the same. Now, the difference between a Nigeria and a UK is that the UK has off-gen that basically they have an energy cap. In Nigeria, unfortunately, we are completely exposed, and our energy mix is such that we also include the NEPA costs. I spent the Easter with my parents in the village. My parents have solar panels and inverters, so but the neighbor 2 houses away was running gen throughout. As in, throughout the 4 days I was there. I said, let me not be sad for this guy, so I did not bother to calculate how much he must have spent. But consider this, all of us, we are sitting in this studio, but if you listen deeply, you can actually hear the hum of the gen in the background. It's there. So we all spend diesel, or money on diesel, we spend money on petrol regularly all the time, and basically this translates to direct costs on us. So that's the difference. The difference is that our system is not that efficient. Remember, on this program, we talked about, this was last year, we talked about the fact that food storage in Nigeria can last a maximum of 4 days. If there's a major shock, 4 days. So the question you have to ask is, how long can our national strategic reserve of refined petroleum products last? Because look at what has happened since this started. The Japanese began to cry, oh, we don't want this war to last up to 200 days because our strategic reserves can last only 200 days. That's the Japanese. The Chinese just sat down. The only thing they did was that they banned the export of refined petroleum products. But their strategic petroleum reserves can last almost 2 years. So they were not, ironically, China was the least affected country in all of this. America released 2 weeks into the war, America released oil from its strategic reserves in order to calm the markets. But as soon as they released it, people began to say, oh, you have released 100 million barrels. The strategic reserve is 600 million barrels. How long do you want this war to last before you empty the strategic reserves? I think that is when that question started being asked, that it began to hit home to Trump and his menagerie, we have done something.
And they were not prepared for the day.
They were completely unprepared.
For how long Iran, for what Iran was capable of doing, and how long they could do it.
So here's the thing. From a strategic point of view, Iran were realistic. They knew that the US would win the war in terms of military, in the short military tit-for-tat exchanges. So what we just watched was 2 different wars being fought. The Americans and the Israelis were fighting a tactical war with all the dazzling victories. On the first day, we killed the supreme leader. We killed 40 of their top leaders. The Iranians were fighting an economic war. So each Iranian Shahed drone costs about $30,000. Each interceptor missile costs $4 million. The Americans, in the first 2 weeks of the war, spent about $13 billion. This war has lasted 6 weeks, and they've been escalating. So it's not as if you can't say 13 times 3 that they spent $39 billion on war. No, they have been escalating. The Pentagon asked Congress for another $250 billion. Nigeria's budget is what?
While he's also firing very senior military chiefs. Let's go on a break.
Hold that thought. Okay, so as you've noticed, we've just begun to unpack how conflict thousands of kilometers away has translated so quickly into higher fuel prices, rising transport costs, and of course expensive food here in the country. But beyond the numbers and the economics, there's a deeper story, one that's playing out in markets, in homes, and the daily decisions Nigerians are now forced to make. We'll take a short break. When we return, conversations continue. You don't want to miss this.
If you haven't been following the discussion, honestly, I must tell you, you are missing a lot. But anyway, welcome back. Before the break, we traced how a conflict far away from Nigeria triggered a chain reaction. Fuel prices rising, transport costs increasing, and ultimately, the price of everyday goods climbing across the country. But beyond the data and the economic analysis, there's a more immediate reality, one that Nigerians are confronting every single day: in markets across the country, traders making difficult choices. What we're seeing is not just inflation, it's adjustment, it's strain for many. And it's about uncertainty about whether their businesses can survive the next few months. And then there's the bigger question of protection. That one, let's not even talk about it. Because in moments like this, when global shocks hit local economies, citizens often look to the government. Empty seats there. Not just for reassurance, but for action, for buffers, for stabilization, for a sense that there is a plan in Nigeria. Did Nigeria's government provide that?
Nope.
Wait now.
I have to pause and laugh at
You people
every
are not the
point.
guest.
Anyway, we have an amazing guest with us. SBM partner Cheta Nwanze is with us. So, Cheta.
Don't ask that question yet. I have a question. No, it's because there's a question on
That
WhatsApp.
intro is so sweet and, oh, God.
There's a question on WhatsApp, Cheta, because truthfully, a lot of Nigerians are struggling to understand. So the person is asking, Filito says, why can't Nigerian government sell crude oil to Dangote in Naira and also buy for Dangote in Naira so we can avoid the dollar pricing, please?
No.
Most of us don't understand why the closure of the Strait of Hormuz should affect us.
Oh, la, la.
Nigerians are struggling to connect. The
Yes,
dots
the
are not
dots.
connecting.
So basically, it's
Explain it to me like a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
so it's the okay. Again, I said this earlier. There are international agreements, strong agreements, which have been in place since before Nigeria was independent. I remember I always put independent in quotes. Global oil trade is done in US dollars. That's the reason for the petrodollar.
Yeah.
So if we want to participate in the global trade, and we need the global trade,
Yeah.
if we want to participate in global trade, we have, if we break it and sell in Naira, we are done. And remember that Nigeria's market is not deep. People need to understand that. Nigeria's market may be broad, but it's not deep at all. And that's one of the things that we need to work on.
Yep.
You can see that China, take China as an example. China has actually worked for, they've become the world's factory.
Yes.
But what they have been working on over the last 15 years, and they've confirmed it with their latest 5-year plan, which they released in March, at the start of March, is they are working on deepening their internal market so that they will not be they will not be subject to global shocks. That's what continuity in planning does. China had basically, when Deng Xiaoping, after the Yangtze Boat Conference, China had a 300-year plan.
Yeah.
But they've been breaking it into 5-5-year bits, and they have stayed the course. One of our problems is policy inconsistency.
Yep.
We do a plan, it looks so good.
Vision 20.
Yeah.
Remember we were on radio? Vision 2020.
You understand?
Oh, I remember.
Next person will come, I'll just scatter everything.
Yes.
Yes.
And then we expect it. So it's not going to work. It doesn't work like that. So we need to understand these things. Secondly, the Iranians, so we may be, in short, no, we are not, it's not me. We are at a global inflection point because the Iranians have made it very clear, and over the course of the night, Trump agreed to their 10-point plan. The Iranians are not participating in the petrodollar. So their oil sales for quite a while now have been in Chinese yuan.
Yes.
Because China does not have a history of weaponizing their currency against other people, which is what the US does with sanctions. So the Iranians are selling their oil in Chinese yuan. Secondly, the Americans have agreed, or Trump has agreed, much to the annoyance of the Israelis, because Netanyahu and Yair Lapid have shouted about it, but I don't think there's much
I think
they can
these
do at this point.
war partners are starting to
Yes, they're starting to part ways. So basically, the Iranians are going to be collecting road for the Strait of Hormuz. That's the money that they're going to use to rebuild their country. So part of the deal at the moment is they will be collecting the equivalent of $2 million, but the Iranians are insisting that it should be in yuan. Why are they insisting it should be in yuan? Because they don't want tomorrow the Americans will impose sanctions again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, come back to this question
honestly,
here. It's important.
which
It's
brings
important.
us-
I wish I had
Which brings us back to Nigeria.
It's my favorite. You know,
Wait, Cheta, we have to ask this question.
Cheta, when we know that you're looking and seeing everything that is on ground. So what would you say, what choices and adjustments have traders been making, this time to see this as a short-term coping mechanism or early warning signs of something deeper?
So And so I think that this survey that we did actually in many respects harks back to the point I keep making that Nigeria is not a nation, but a collection of different nations. Because in the 6 geopolitical zones, there are very different viewpoints. And for me, what stood out is the fact that people everywhere had heard about the war. People everywhere had discussed the war, and people everywhere have seen price increases. But the fear of the harm that it will do their business, 80% of respondents in North Central felt that this thing will do their business harm, 65% in the Northeast, 70% in the Northwest, 54% in the South-South, 44% in the Southeast, and 78% in the Southwest. It's, for me, that those differences go to show the differences in exposure, as it were, the different regions in Nigeria have. And that speaks to lack of connectivity within Nigeria, because that has remained one of our biggest problems. Nigeria is not a very well interconnected country. And as a result, we are having different mindsets, essentially different nations moving in different directions.
Or moving independently. We might move, we might be moving in the same direction, but at different paces, at different velocity, for different reasons.
So I agree with that, but it's not quite independent, because we're all tethered, at the end of the day, we're all tethered to the unified thing is federal allocation.
Yes.
So we're all tethered to that. But we're moving in different directions, but tethered to a center. So with smart, proper messaging and policy, we can actually draw everybody. Now, I would like to draw everybody's attention to this, because to what is displaying on the screen now, because this is, why is it?
They'll bring it back, don't worry.
Because it's very important for us to understand that the global economy is interconnected.
Yeah.
But the key thing is that the global economy has 8 choke points. So the two that affect us most directly are the Strait of Hormuz and the Suez Canal. They are 3 actually, the Bab el Mandeb Straits. They are all within around the Persian Gulf. Because what they mean is that China am I permitted to walk to the screen to point?
We didn't set up for it.
Please, let's go back. Producer, I beg now.
They'll bring it back. Go ahead.
So basically, most of the world's production is from the Far East, China. It all has to go through the Strait of Malacca, which is the number 7 on that map.
Which has the boots in the east of Africa side.
So as you can see, if you've been following global geopolitics, the Americans have been trying to get a hold in that place. Get the Philippines, all of those places. The Chinese have been resisting them. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is the energy place, while the Bab el Mandeb and the Suez Canal are manufactured goods. The only strategic bypass is the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa. What happens is, if the Strait of Hormuz and the Suez Canal and Bab el Mandeb and the Gibraltar Strait, but the Gibraltar Strait is not a problem really, even though it's a choke point, but there's peace in that place. Now, if all of these places are blocked, the only place you have to bypass all by the Strait, the Cape of Good Hope.
But that adds time and energy and money.
Yeah, in Nigeria's case, from Shenzhen or Shanghai, that adds 15 to 16 days of transit time.
Yes. And what's the cost of that?
It depends. It depends on what you are transporting. But it could be anywhere per shipment. It could be between $4,000 and $13,000, which ultimately is passed on to the consumer. So essentially, everything becomes more expensive.
Yes.
But we now live in a globalized world where there are supply chains because of basically proximity and all of those things in terms of, so all of us have these tablets or phones on our, each tablet or phone is not produced in one country.
No.
The different components are produced in different places, shipped to a location, put together, and then
shipped further.
So all of that, we've built a globalized economy that is not going to go away anytime soon. The Americans have been actively, they call it reshoring, they've been actively trying to bring back they've been trying to bring manufacturing back home. But it's simply not practical.
And it's not even affordable for them.
It's not affordable for them. That's the first step of
It's not affordable for Americans to bring
so because of
to
that,
become made in America again.
Basically, we have not. So we have integrated into that global economy, but we haven't yet taken advantage of it, and that is our big problem. How do we take advantage of this global economy? Now, this is graphic
Slide,
is when we spoke with traders in different parts of the country. These are the so a lot of people had heard about the war. I was kind of surprised that only more than half of people in the Southeast had heard about the war. Everybody, at least a lot of people have discussed the war.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people have noticed price increases. It's very, very so this war and wars like that's how. So I think what we're all learning as a result of this war is that geopolitics matters.
Okay, let's come back home, Cheta. It's important I ask this question because in Nigeria, the report points to a largely reactive government. All right, so in your view, what should have been the ideal, immediate, proactive response that looked, that would have happened in the country within the first 2 weeks of? We saw countries going into internal mode, everyone shutting down. But us, it seems, if you compare our response to other countries, what exactly were we not getting wrong? Was it capacity, coordination, political will? What exactly were we falling? Where exactly were we falling
in reality,
short?
there is nothing we could have done.
Oh my God.
That's the reality. We don't. You can only.
That's like
You can
giving
only.
0 over 10.
0 is a good grade.
Don't die.
See, no, because we're working from a negative. So I would give us -4 or something.
But
like
was
that.
anybody prepared that a war was
We were not
coming?
So
Like-
that's the point. We haven't built the strategic buffers over time. So it
Okay,
doesn't.
so wait. So
it
what you're
doesn't
telling me is
matter.
that we didn't learn from the global economic collapse. We didn't learn from the Iraq war, the U.S.-Iraq war. We didn't learn from
anything,
COVID
right?
shutdown.
We don't learn.
What else there? Anything global in the past, let's
Nothing.
say 20 years or
We've-
30 years?
Yeah, we've not learned
Cheta's
from
face says it all.
anything.
It's not.
Basically, in
not
our
looking good.
lifetimes. I mean, me and you are about the same age.
You
be
have
honest.
gray.
Let's
Please,
not,
you people see gray.
Part of the problem is that
Go ahead, please,
find-
please. We
I have
don't
to find
discuss
salary
age.
money. So anyway, so we have not learned anything, and as a result, we haven't built anything. So basically, again, I'll bring us back to. I was here in in March of 2025, and we discussed. No, that was another episode. That was even earlier. We discussed about Nigeria's lack of food reserves.
Hey.
We don't have reserves for anything.
Yep.
And
We don't
therefore,
have real
Nigeria now
reserves.
tops the African continent as the country with the most food wastage. We're talking about it next week.
Have you been to Benue State?
Have you eaten Benue mango?
Have you eaten Benue yam?
Have you been
I
to
have Benue yam.
End of
That's all I
discussion.
eat.
Sweet.
End of
like-
discussion.
I
Have
don't
you
do
been to
things.
Benue?
End of discussion.
The majority of it sits down and rots.
Wastes.
And it is now worsened by the insecurity that's driving Benue farmers. from their hands.
Also, it reminds me of something I saw, a farmer coming out to plead with the government to help them find ways to sell off, their harvests, because he had so much pineapples and they were wasting. Most of them were rotten.
Please, I don't even know. I honestly...
Oh, wait, let me just ask, because I've looked at the time. The time is not with us. So yesterday, there is some kind of lull in this situation. The United States and Iran...
They've announced a ceasefire.
Yes, announced a 2-week ceasefire. Can this 2-week ceasefire also
Translate.
provide a 2-week respite? Or
No.
relief?
Unfortunately.
Let me ask the question.
No,
Can it provide a respite for Nigerians? So you're telling me in this 2 weeks, nothing... Because
it's
all
not
prices have
just-
started coming down.
Yes, but it's not just for Nigerians. This is not just about Nigerians. So, if the ceasefire holds, then yes, there will be a long-term respite.
If
Yeah,
the
if it
entire 2
holds.
weeks hold,
Yes.
and then it continues...
But considering the fact that one of the key things that's going to be agreed for the war to stop is the fact that Iran, the new reality is that Iran can toll the Strait of Hormuz. What it basically means is that cost will be factored into everything going forward. So the new normal will be higher than the old normal, slightly. That's one.
Yeah.
But it's a 2-week law. The Iranians have already made it clear they are entering into these negotiations without trust.
And ready to pull out at any point in time.
2 times they have gone into negotiations with the U.S. and 2 times they have been attacked during negotiations.
By Israel.
So by Israel with the support of the U.S. So the markets are going to price the fact that the Iranians are very edgy, and as a result the whole thing could start at any time. I mean, part of the deal that was announced by the Americans and the Iranians and the Pakistanis who brokered it is that part of this ceasefire includes Lebanon.
Yeah,
the Israelis have now announced in the last few hours that no, Lebanon is not part of it. That's a problem. So the Americans have to rein in the Israelis and be seen to be reining them in very fast.
To be able to control the situation.
Yes, the Israelis are the big unknown. Will the Americans be able to bring pressure to bear on them to behave? It's kind of like having a dog on a chain. Can you keep that dog?
Can you muzzle it?
Can you Can you muzzle it?
But Cheta, I know this global politics and everything that we're hearing. What is our government really doing about thinking and planning? Because I hear strategic work like buffer, that things that we ought to be thinking ahead, reserves, planning, that involves years. We are having political, I would say, honestly, there's no continuity. Because I find out that any government that changes, even good policies are taken away and new ones are put there. What are we going to do in the long run? Because we cannot just continue like this, be playing internal politics when we need to be eyeing the world and situating our country better.
You have less than a minute on that.
It's incentives, basically. It's about what the Nigerian